Alright, welcome to Old World Gaming. This is the episode that was rudely interrupted by the postman. If you just watched, or if you've seen just a short little 2-minute episode that I just did around a delivery I've got. But I'm not really, I don't really mind. I was looking forward to getting that parcel anyway. So anyway, in this episode, I am currently in the middle of doing my Night Goblin army, which anyone who's seen any of my videos will know. But I'm currently putting together prepping a spearman unit to go with Grimcrack, my purple colour scheme warboss. These guys will be part of a purple colour scheme. I'm in the middle of cleaning off the mould lines off of the unit, so those guys are clean, these guys are not. If you don't know what that means, you can see, I don't know if you can see particularly well on here, but around his hood you can see there's a line that goes down the centre of his hood. That's not meant to be there. That is a result of the process that's used to create plastic miniatures. So they have two, I'm going to put this down. So when a plastic miniature is created, well, you can see these sprues, right? So there are two chunks of metal basically that are held together like this, and plastic is pumped into the metal, and then they're pulled apart, and you get this. But what that means is down the edges where the two pieces of metal join, you have these lines, which are not part of the miniature. They are just the result of having the two pieces of metal stuck together. So you may be able to see, so like down, it follows around his shield and goes down the edge of his cloak. So yeah, that's not a bad shot. So yeah, so this line is not meant to be on here. So what I've done on these guys is I have cleaned that line off. So in this, and like you can see down by his foot, you can see the markings where I've cleaned that off. So this episode, what I thought I'd do is I'd take you through the process of prepping a model from start to finish, which includes how to take it off the sprue, how to glue it together using the glue that I use, and I'll also stick the sand on the base as well. Hopefully it won't take too long because I'm doing some very, very simple models here, nothing particularly complicated. So for this unit that I did previously, I've got these one-piece metal netters, and they're quite old, they're about 20 years old. About 15 years ago, so only slightly less old, they made this sprue. In fact, it will tell you, should say when it was made on one of these sprues. Should have a date, here we go, 2006. So that's, actually this is almost 20 years ago, all right, fine, so 18 years ago, this one. The others came out in about 2000, I think, so these are newer. But what they did is they bought out the options to make netters from these plastic guys. So the others were one-piece metal ones. So since I've had these, I've had this sprue since about 2006 and not used it. Or I've used some of it. I've made some command guys. I think that's the main things. Oh, and some archers probably. I've wanted to make the netters up to go with my spearman unit. So that's what we're going to do here. The netters are just a guy and his net. So we'll do that in this episode. So the best way of getting a model off of one of these sprues is to use a pair of clippers or side cutters. These are from the Army Painter. And what you can see about these are not the same as you would have in a toolbox for like cutting wires and stuff like that. These have one flat side. So you can see here, this side is completely flat and flush. So there's no, whereas this side, they dent into together. So you've got like this V shape between two pieces. That's probably a bit of a better shot. Now wire cutters that come in a toolbox have this V shape on both sides, and that's not good for taking your miniatures off of your plastic. The reason being, I'll show you as I do this one, is you want to use the flat side against the model. If you were to use the V side, you'd end up with a massive chunk. Why not? I'll show you on a random, let's show you on this random arm here. So if I use the wrong side of the clippers, when I cut that off, I'm left with this big old chunk. of sprue, and what you really want to be doing is using the flat side and pushing the flat side against the miniature, and then you're left with a much smaller piece of flash, which you can take off separately. So that's that's why you use these side cutters or clippers. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So I'm just going to clip off the 3 net pieces. So I'm coming in from this angle. I could have done it from that side, but I actually can do it from this side. That's okay. Sometimes you'll find that one angle is better than the other. So that's not so bad doing that one. But yeah, sometimes you just find it's much easier to do it from a particular angle. So always look for the most optimal angle. So yeah, so the flat side's flush against it, and then I'm only being left with a small amount of sprues still attached. So it's got a bit of a marking. We'll clean that up in a bit, and I'll show you how I do that. So that's my nets, and then some bodies. So let's go for these guys who are like got these evil grins. I feel like that's the kind of face a night goblin will make as he's netting someone and feeling rather good about himself as he does it. And this guy here. All right, there we go. So that's our guys. That's all I'm using for this, which is quite good because otherwise it's like gluing all their arms and stuff on, but they're just single pieces. So yeah, so this obviously will just go on here, and I'll be gluing that on. But you can see we've got these blemishes where I've cut them off the sprue, and we don't really want those. And then the mould lines that we've already talked about earlier goes down his hat. So the nets have got a mould line that goes along there. I won't do anything with the nets, the one that goes around the nets. So on his sleeve, those I care about a bit more than the others. And then the guys, I've got them down the hoods, just like the spearmen did, and along the side of their cloaks and on his legs. So I'm going to be cleaning those off as the next move. So to do that, I use a crafting knife, although there it is, hiding over here. So this is just a crafting knife with a blade. If your knife is new, they're very sharp blades, so do be very careful with them. They're the kind of almost surgical blades that are used by doctors because they tend to be very sharp. So for this, a Games Workshop actually do a mould line removal tool. I don't have one of those. They're a much more newer thing than I have, so I've never had one. But yes, those, from what I understand, those are blunt and have a hard edge for scraping off. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm just scraping off. But yeah, are blunt so that they won't actually injure you, which sounds like a very sensible thing. Now, for the most part, I tend to scrape them by putting my thumb there and then pulling the blade back, because what you don't want to do, particularly if you're using a blade and not a mould removal tool, mould line remover, is you don't want to end up slicing into your finger or your thumb. I have done that many times in the past. It's not a fun experience, and a complete waste of time, as you then have to cope with cleaning up blood everywhere, and that's just a waste of time. You get blood everywhere, and then you've got to clean that up. It's just a pain, and is actual pain. And then, okay, so here's the biggest drawback for having sliced your thumb, is when you're doing something like this and trying to clean more off, you're just pressing into your wound, and it's the worst thing. I do speak from, unfortunately, painful experience. And that is something I've done more times than I care to think about. So yeah, so do be careful if your blade is sharp. This blade is not sharp at all, really. So that's kind of in my interest. So yeah, so I'm just going to go around and clean this off, and you can see it's a fairly simple job. There is some on his feet as well, but for the most part that's okay, because unless it's like really lumpy and prevents him sticking flush on the base, then I'd do something about it. But these, I think, we'll have a look in a minute. but these are pretty good, so there's not much, yeah, not much we need to do, I don't think. So this inside here, you can see he's got this. We don't want to leave that there because that will stop the net, his arm being glued on. So we do want to cut that down. I don't know if you can do that with a mould line removal tool. So that could be a limitation of them. But yeah, again, be careful because you are, for something like that, that's when, certainly the way that I like to do it is I'm pulling it towards my thumb, but very gently. What I don't know, I find having both of my hands on the model to do it is much more controlled rather than trying to have hands separate, and then it's much harder to maintain that control. So having my both hands touching the model means that they kind of move together, and then even if you're a shaky person, both your hands are moving, like shaking at the same time, and so it's kind of giving you a single frame of reference. So yeah, so that's a bit of a tip, is always have, even when I'm painting, I don't know if you've noticed, if you've looked at any of my other videos, when I'm painting, both of my hands are always touching the model. Normally that's at this point, and I'm painting, but my hands are together. So that's a top tip I would suggest, because as soon as your hands are not both touching the same the model, then you'll find that it's much harder to do any detail work, whether that's scraping off mould lines or painting. So key tip is to make sure that both your hands are touching the figure. Alright, we're almost done on this guy. I can hear my laptop started making a lot of noise. Apologies if that's disruptive to the audio. Let's see if I can quickly convince it to stop. There we go. Okay. It all got a lot dimmer around here. Never mind. And I just realised my my light that I'm working on isn't turned on. Or no, we're just going to have to power through without that turned on. I feel like I just got lots of shadow arrived from turning my monitor. My monitor's plugged into my laptop, and that was giving additional light that I hadn't even noticed. There we go. I think we're all right. We've just got a bit of a shadow now. Okay, so for these, the sleeves have got a bit of a mould line on, and then there's the bit of sprue where it left that blemish. But for the most part, that's all right. This side you can see has got quite, I don't know if you can see it, yeah, it's got quite a large mould line on it. So I'm just going to scrape that off. There we are, and try and address that blemish. That'll probably do on there. Everything else is going to be covered. I mean, that does annoy me a little bit in here, so I'm just going to scrape that off a bit. There we go. Right, let's just do the other two quickly, and then we'll start gluing these guys together. It's one of my, I really enjoy putting models together, particularly the multi-part ones, getting to like design some cool looking guys. Obviously characters are and like unit champions are the most interesting, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. And the good thing about plastics over metals is you can cut them apart and then glue them back together. So if you want to switch like hands or heads or stuff like that, it's much easier to do it than it was with metals. So yeah, so there we go. This last guy has got a bit on his hand that we don't want. Is that his hand? I'm not even sure. Yes, it is. That's his thumb. So we'll just get rid of this, and on his sleeve there. I will do an episode at some point on metal miniatures, because they are different. You probably don't really want to be using a knife on metal miniatures. You'll be using files. But yeah, I'll cover that when I do a metal one. I almost used old netters for this unit, and that would have given me the metal models to demonstrate on, but I didn't. We've got these plastic ones, which is fine because it's good to have a a plastic demo. Right, okay, so that's the guys all done and ready to go. I'm pretty sure their feet are fairly good. Yeah, there's not really any problems with that. Let's just check the others as well. Yep, and yep, yeah, they've got no issues. Okay, little plastic bits. Hoover that up later. Right, so for the glue, I really like this Revell glue. Comes in this kind of pot. I used to get mine, like, it hasn't changed in 30 years. I used to use it for Airfix, and yeah, I used to get mine from a model train shop, and it was £1, and I think these days it's like £2 or £3, but that's fine. Lasts forever, like really never dries up, and will last you hundreds, maybe thousands of models. And it's got this spout. Something I do is put this. This is a bit of, you know, you get those like sandwich ties, which are like flat, but inside they've got this wire. Just stripped off the kind of papery bit around the edge, and I put this in to stop the glue from clogging it up, because that is one thing that will happen, is the glue will set. But if you leave something like that in there, then it won't get clogged up. So I can see some glue coming out already, so I'm just going to dab this on his feet. So this glue is called polystyrene cement, because you may or may not know, but Warhammer models are made of polystyrene, which sounds weird, because you think of polystyrene as being like that white fluffy stuff that protects your microwave when you buy it. But this is the difference between this and that polystyrene is that is expanded polystyrene, which has had air blown into it to make it all kind of like fluffy and soft. Whereas Games Workshop miniatures are obviously made with polystyrene that's not expanded. If you've ever tried putting plastic glue, as it's commonly known, but polystyrene cement, on to white expanded polystyrene, you'll notice that it makes big old holes in it because it just melts it. If you haven't done that, it's worth a try, but do it in a ventilated area, because I'm pretty sure it releases some nasty gases when it does it. But it is a bit of fun to play around, popping some polystyrene cement, plastic glue onto expanded polystyrene, because it makes some cool shapes, which you can use to make, like, I've seen people make scenery by doing that for like chaos wastes and whatnot, or for like Space Marine melter damage on stuff. So that's quite fun. But yes, so the way that it works is as it does on the expanded polystyrene, is it will melt the two pieces together. So unlike super glue, this is one of the reasons why you don't use super glue for this. Super glue is a barrier between the two and sticks the piece to the super glue and then the other piece to the super glue, but there's still the super glue holding them together. What polystyrene cement does is actually melts the two different pieces, and then when it sets, they have become a single piece of plastic. Now, they may be a bit weaker than the other bits, because they're unlikely to have a perfect connection, but they do become a single piece of plastic, which is why they're far more durable than, say, resin miniatures stuck together with super glue, or even plastic miniatures stuck together with super glue, because they have become a single piece of plastic. And if I was to leave this for long enough and then start touching it without kind of attaching it to something, you'd notice that it was tacky. And I probably should have put the glue. Oh no, it's all right. I was going to say I probably should have put the glue on his shoulders, or his sockets, as it were, because it was a bit hard to get it in. But yeah, there we go. These guys are looking good. Yeah, I do like these nets. I have only got the 3. Oh, I just did the thing which I said I probably shouldn't do. Yeah, I've only got 3, but I do have like 20 of the old metal ones, and I really should use them rather than just like having loads of new stuff. I could probably sell them, but I've got them. I can't bother to sell them. I'll just use them. So there we go. So that's these guys now. on their bases. So we've taken off the sprues, we've cleaned them up, we've glued them together. They're now all ready and on their bases. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick sand on their bases. So I'm just popping this back in to stop the glue from clogging it up and setting. But yeah, so Revel glue, you can get this from Amazon for a few quid, or if you've got a local hobby shop, they may stock it. But this is excellent, my favourite. I would recommend it. I am recommending it. Use it, but it's up to you, obviously. Something I don't know if Games Workshop have addressed it. I think they actually have one that they do a bit like this now. Back when I was in the store, they had the glue had like big spouts that was like this thickness instead of this thickness, and the glue was thick and stodgy, and it was just not ideal. I had to use it obviously as a staff member when I was making the store models, but my preference for at home was always to use the Revel glue. Right, this brush might be a little bit big for this because it's got quite some tricky areas to get into. So what I'm doing now is I am using some PVA to put on the base, and then I'll be dunking it in some sand and sticking it on. I'm not going to use this one anymore. I need a better brush than that. That one's a bit too unwieldy for my liking for this particular task. Okay, so a much better brush. This is an old small dry brush. But yeah, this should get into the gaps without caking the model with the glue, which is something I don't particularly want to do. So let's so I'm just putting a layer of PVA. I'm only putting it on the top, not putting it on the sides. My PVA is in a bottle beside me, which I'm dunking it in. Normally I have it on a palette, but I didn't prepare that before this, and I figured just dunking it will be fine. Yeah, so I'm putting this all over. I'm not sure I've seen anyone put it on the sides before, but I guess that's an option. Well, certainly is not what I want to be doing, because I'm using these trays, and if I had sand on the side or texture on the side, I wouldn't be able to fit them in the trays. I've done a video about how to assemble and texture and paint and flock the movement trays. So if you haven't seen that and you're doing some movement trays, go check that out. So this turns out this is the longest part of this process. Normally it wouldn't be, but I think it's because these guys have got these nets just get in the way, right in the way of where I want to be gluing. And normally this is quite a short process sticking this on, but there we go. You learn these things. Okay. So I've got glue all over his base. I just want to make sure that it goes right up to the edge, but I don't want it coming over the lip. So you can see here, that's just dipped down a little bit. So I'm just going to wipe that off. And then I just put that in my mouth, but I can't talk with that in my mouth. Then I'm going to dunk him in the sand. So this sand is just builder's sand that I got out of a bag of sand that I've got in the yard. And just dunk that in there, and that gives you the texture. And then he is now ready for spraying. So that's the next step that I'll do with these guys, is I will spray them black, so they'll end up looking like this. So this is the champion, the boss for this unit. And then once they're sprayed black, so you just use the Games Workshop Chaos Black spray, and then once they're sprayed, I'll do the whole unit basically. I'll get them all to this stage, and then I'll spray all 40 of the guys, and then I'll do some episodes on how to batch paint these spearmen, and I'll do some on painting these guys' nets and stuff like that. But yeah, so there we go. I just thought that might be helpful for some people who are new to the hobby, haven't done any plastic miniatures before, may not know how to base them, remove mould lines, and the kind of glue that we'd recommend. So yeah, there we go. Hopefully that was a useful episode, and thanks for watching.